Welcome to the third and final video in the Missouri Constitution series. You're almost done. Let's get to it. Article 4 deals with the executive branch. It's similar to the executive branch at the national level in that it enforces or executes laws. However, the head of the executive branch in Missouri is called the governor. Missouri's governor is Mike Kehoe. The governor's term and term limits are the same as the executive branch at the national level. 4-year terms, 2-term limits. Anyone who wants to be a Missouri governor must be 30 years old, live in Missouri for 10 years prior to the election, and a citizen for 15 years. If it looks like the people who wrote the Missouri Constitution didn't want some yahoo coming in and running the state with delusions of grandeur, thinking they could just take over, well, you're right. Missouri has to be your home if you're going to be the governor. The governor is a very busy person. He appoints some state government officials, and the Senate must approve those appointments before they get their job, just like at the national level. But not all cabinet members are appointed and approved. At the state level, some of those cabinet members are elected. We'll get to those here in just a little bit. The governor has the power of reprieves, commutations, and pardons over convicted people who broke state laws. The president has these powers at the national level when dealing with people who are convicted of breaking federal laws. A pardon is basically a get-out-of-jail-free card. If the governor thinks someone has been wronged or wrongly imprisoned or been rehabilitated and deserves to get out of jail, he can just let them go. A reprieve is a break in punishment. So if the convict needs to get out of jail for a little while, the governor can grant a reprieve. For example, let's say that Daryl drove his truck through the front window at break time. He gets arrested and convicted with a 10-year sentence. Poor Daryl. 2 years pass and he finds out that his daughter wants to get married. He can request a reprieve from the governor. If the governor chooses to grant the reprieve, Daryl gets to go to his daughter's wedding and go back to jail when he's done. The governor can put specific stipulations on reprieves if he wants to. A commutation means that the governor has commuted the sentence to a lesser sentence. So let's say Josie is convicted of a heinous murder and the judge sentences her to be executed. The governor can step in before the execution and commute that sentence to life in prison. So Josie doesn't have to die, but she also doesn't get out of prison. The governor can call a special election to fill a vacancy in the United States House of Representatives. If there's a vacancy in the Senate, it's a bit more serious, and the governor is required to appoint a replacement according to the U.S. Constitution. It makes sense that the U.S. House can wait for a special election since there's 435 of them, and they are all up for re-election every 2 years. The Senate only has 100 members, and they are there for a 6-year stretch. The governor also sets up the state budget. He sets goals for the administration. Once a year, he tells everyone about those goals and that budget in the State of the State address. The Missouri Constitution gives the governor the power over the state militia, which is the National Guard. This can be kind of confusing because the National Guard is paid by the national government. Sometimes the president uses the National Guard in conflicts overseas. However, if the governor sees a need within the state for something the military can do, he can call up the National Guard without the president's permission. It used to be that the National Guard was strictly under state control, but those lines have been blurred as the federal government has increased in power. The governor also has the power of the line item veto and the ability to call a special session of the General Assembly. But I covered that in the second video, so make sure and go back and check it out if you've forgotten what those things mean. The state executive branch includes a bureaucracy, just like at the national level. However, some of that bureaucracy is elected by the people, which is not like the national level. Please notice the positions that are elected and their responsibilities. These are big time jobs, and the people that wrote the Constitution wanted those jobs to be in the hands of the voters, not in the hands of the governor or the state senate. In other words, you need to know their jobs and their responsibilities. The names change, but the jobs and the responsibilities are forever. Okay, so first, know that the lieutenant governor is the president of the state senate, and he or she will take over the governor's position if the governor can't do it anymore or that position becomes vacant in the middle of a term. All right, so the next job is the Secretary of State. You know, when anyone says they or them, and you don't really know who they or them are, you just know they or them are out there and they have authority. Generally, they or them is the Secretary of State. For example, you want to start a business and you have to register with them, you register with the Secretary of State's office. Or when someone says they have to do something about these scams, that would be the Secretary of State's office investigating it. Or when they say they have a record of that somewhere, well, the Secretary of State's office has a record of all official documents. If the people handling your investments are not reputable or they're just kind of a little shady, you report it to the Secretary of State, who then investigates the accusation. If the repo man is searching for a car or the banks need to foreclose on a mortgage, they have to start that process in the Secretary of State's office. Over 200 people work for the Secretary of State, and that office covers everything from elections to businesses, as well as archiving executive orders, court cases, legislation, tax documents, census records. Genealogy nerds love the Secretary of State's office. Any candidate that wants to be elected into any office from the state of Missouri must first file with the Secretary of State's office. And it's the job of the Secretary of State to make sure the people know who they are if the people want to know before the election. Actually, anything that is to go on the ballot is the responsibility of the Secretary of State, because he or she is the one who is ultimately responsible for elections in Missouri. The Secretary of State does not prosecute infractions they find, they just investigate it. If or when a problem is found, that is turned over to the Missouri Attorney General. The Attorney General is basically the state's lawyer. Not only does the Attorney General prosecute offenders found by the Secretary of State's office, they also represent the legal interests of Missouri and its people, but they don't take individual cases. They don't take clients. Missouri is their client. Okay. Also, if Missouri turns up in court because of a business or a group that's violating Missourians' rights, or the state takes another state to court because that state is violating Missourians' rights, the Attorney General's office will argue Missouri's case. The last major job of the Attorney General is to answer any questions or give advice on legal matters to the governor or any legislator or bureaucrat that has a legal question. The treasurer is Missouri's chief financial officer, or CFO. Basically, the treasurer writes the checks to the local governments, bureaucracies, and organizations that have gotten money because of different laws, and then he or she balances the checkbook or bank accounts. When there's more money incoming than outgoing, the treasurer will safely invest the surplus money to maximize the possible interests with as little risk as possible so that the state makes more money. He or she is also responsible for unclaimed property. Basically, it's the state's lost and found. The state treasurer does not make sure people spend the state money properly. The treasurer only gets the money where it needs to go. The state auditor will send people all over the state to check out the books of local governments and different state-funded organizations to make sure that money they got is being spent the way it was intended. These are jobs in the executive bureaucracy that are elected by the people, and they're kind of a big deal. Article 5 discusses Missouri's judicial branch. The courts are set up like the national courts, a pyramid. The courts that first hear a case are called circuit courts, and every county has a circuit court. They deal with criminal and civil cases. That means they have original jurisdiction. If the circuit court's ruling makes one of the parties unhappy, they can appeal to the next highest court or the appellate court or the Court of Appeals. Appellate court and Court of Appeals, same thing. There are only 3 courts of appeals in the state of Missouri: the Eastern District, the Western District, and the Southern District. The highest court in the state of Missouri is the Missouri Supreme Court. And the head of the Missouri Supreme Court is the Chief Justice. Once the Missouri Supreme Court rules on a case, there's only one more level of appeal, and it's highly unlikely that court will hear the case unless it's a constitutional issue. I'm talking about the United States Supreme Court. In order to be a judge in Missouri, a person has to be 30 years old, a U.S. citizen for 15 years, and licensed to practice law in Missouri. But it's so much more complicated than a simple election to pick a judge in Missouri. We have a crazy way of choosing judges. The state actually made it up themselves. That's why it's called the Missouri Merit System, or the Missouri Nonpartisan Plan. This plan exists because in the 1930s, Missouri courts were very corrupt because of a powerful political boss called Tom Pendergast. He ran a political machine that paid people or threatened people to elect the judges that would rule on cases the way he wanted. He pretty much handpicked judges. When the Pendergast machine began to fall apart, the people designed a system to pick judges based more on merit than on a vote that could be purchased. In a nutshell, the plan starts with a committee of people who are not affiliated with a political party, and they make a list of qualified candidates that could be judges. That list is narrowed down to 3 people by a bunch of lawyers and judges. The governor gets to pick the new judge from that list of 3. After the judge does this duty for a year, the people get to vote. They say, yes, we want to keep him, or nope, throw him out. If they say, yes, we want to keep him, he stays on for 12 years, and then he goes back on the ballot. Yes, we keep him, no, throw him out. If at any time the voters say no, throw him out, that nonpartisan plan starts all over again. The Missouri Nonpartisan Plan is pretty complicated, but it's designed to keep out the goons who work for political machines and get rid of crooked judges, and it was so effective that several other states adopted the same system. Yep, Missouri is a trendsetter, at least when it comes to the courts. I'm going to take a little detour right now and talk a little bit about direct democracy. There are 2 ways that laws can be made in Missouri without the General Assembly or the governor. That's right. I'm fixing to tell you the closest way you're ever going to get in the state of Missouri to a direct democracy at the state level. An initiative is direct democracy. With an initiative, the people write a proposed law. They petition to gather enough signatures. The proposal goes on the ballot and the people vote. And if the people vote yes, it becomes a law. If the people vote no, it dies. See? Pure democracy. No elected official involved at all. A referendum is similar, but it starts in the General Assembly. If a bill is going through the General Assembly and the people don't like the way that it's going, the people can send out a petition to get that bill pulled out of the General Assembly. And if enough signatures are collected, then the bill is put on the ballot and the people vote. If the majority of people vote yes, it becomes a law. If the majority of people vote no, it dies. Initiatives and referendums could never work at the national level. America's just too darn big. Recall is another form of people power where a petition is sent and signatures are collected, and it's not used to write laws, though. It's used to dump or attempt to dump an elected official in the middle of his or her term if the people are concerned or dissatisfied with what's going on. There is no process for a recall in Missouri. It's just important for you to know that there are some states that do give the people that power. All right, moving on. Article 6 deals with local governments and how they are chartered or created. A charter is like a local government constitution. Each one is different based on the purpose of that local government. For example, a charter for a water district is going to look very different from a charter for a city. This article also deals with how local governments should handle their finances and elections. Article 7 lines out the rules for public officers and elected officials. Article 8 lines out the rules for voting. In Missouri, qualified voters have to be 18 years old or older. They have to be United States citizens who are residents of Missouri. Oh, yes, in order to vote, you have to be registered. If you're 18 and need to register, go to the Secretary of State's website. You can register online. Super easy. People who have been ruled mentally incapable by a judge or people who are involuntarily confined in a mental institution cannot vote. Felons who have finished their sentence and probation and parole, they can. Article 9 is all about education. Anyone under the age of 21 can get a free public education. That does not include college, but if someone really struggles to graduate high school, they can keep trying until they're 21. This applies mostly to students who need extra help and resources. As far as colleges are concerned, the state does have to maintain state colleges like Missouri Western State University in St. Joseph and Northwest Missouri State University in Maryville. This article also makes it unconstitutional to discriminate when hiring teachers. Article 10 deals with taxes, all taxes that are and can be levied at the state and local levels. These include state income tax, local personal property tax, and sales tax. It's important to know that Missouri's government cannot raise taxes without a vote of the people, but local governments can if it's written in their charter that way. Article 11 deals with corporations, what they can and what they cannot do, how they can be created, and what they have to do once they are created. Missouri has a ton of corporations. Article 12 is all about how to amend the Missouri Constitution, and for the purpose of this class, all you really need to know is that it cannot be amended without a vote of the people. Article 13 lists the benefits and compensation of state officers and elected officials, their money. And Article 14 lays out the rights regarding marijuana, as well as the rules and the taxes. In a nutshell, recreational marijuana is legal in Missouri. Taxes are collected and distributed amongst the state and local governments. Don't be stupid. Don't be irresponsible. Well, that's it. You made it through the basics of the Missouri Constitution. Understand it's constantly changing and people amend it regularly. But as long as you understand the basics explained in these 3 videos, you should be able to protect your rights, know the positions people are running for in major state elections, and how to make your government do what is best for the people. Now go use your powers for good.